don't have any focus. You're all over the place.
When I was 18, I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Now you do.
I took the past 7 years to kind of explore my opportunities.
So, what is the reason why we don't seem to be producing unicorns, for example? Which are billion-dollar companies.
Innovation never comes from a place where comfort lies. You have to step out of your comfort zone. Humankind has never invented something when we are comfortable. We've only created something when, something has hurt us. Necessity hits, and that's when we get creative. That's when innovation comes out.
This is not just nature. I think it's nurture too.
I still have a long way to go. But a lot of it has to do with the values that were instilled in me since I was young.
Who are they?
My parents.
Nice to meet you.
So that was what these additional chairs were for.
Yes.
But as a parent, I feel very happy for whatever he's achieved as of now.
Okay. Pranav, welcome to IQ, and which stands for?
Inconvenient questions.
How ready are you to be inconvenienced?
Well, it has been something I'm convenient with for quite a while. So,
okay, let's see how far we can push the boundaries with you.
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks
and
for
I'm
having
going to
me.
be having a lot of fun, hopefully at your expense.
No worries.
All right. Now, you've been doing a whole host of things. How old are you now?
Just turned 25, a couple of months back.
Ripe old age of 25. Now, the number of things you've been doing, when you look at it, it's not just exhaustive. It's actually exhausting. Even for the onlooker, even for the spectator who's watching you do these things. Now, just to give an example of the frenetic pace at which you've been doing things since the age of 18, I believe, in the area of entrepreneurship. I believe you started this journey soon after your JC, junior college, while you were waiting to go into national service, to
That's
start
right.
doing your national service. Several student programs. Flint, you started this company called Flint in 2022, essentially paper batteries, sustainability, startup growth intern in Vietnam, and that was in 2023. ShareRight, which is a shared services kind of company that optimizes resources, that seeks to optimize resources. That was in 2021. It's still operating.
Yes, that's
very
right.
much so. EcoCupid, which amplifies the voices of entrepreneurs and others in the ecosystem.
That's
Am I
right.
correct?
That's right.
Now, that's in 2022.
It's 23. Yeah.
And it's still functioning very much.
That's still going on, yeah.
So ShareRight and EcoCupid, these are the two enterprises that are still very active.
Yep.
And of course, in 2020, you co-founded the ASEAN Business Youth Asia
Association.
right?
Yep.
Now, that's a whole lot of things. Now, here's the thing, right? Some people would say that you are a maverick, that you have done so many things. Now, on the other hand,
But coming.
on the other hand, there are people who will say, you don't have any focus. You're all over the place. Now, that there's wisdom in that logic.
Yeah.
And you are obviously swimming against the current.
I guess then your question is why? Well, I believe when I was 18, I didn't know what I wanted to do.
You mean to say now you do?
In a certain sense, I took the past 7 years to kind of explore my opportunities. And in this current world, you have so many different things going on. Flint, I joined the team that was already there. Back then, it wasn't even paper batteries. They were working on something else, like modular power banks. I joined because I knew I was interested in sustainability. I wanted to explore what sustainability was. That's what I covered in my education as well. Because when most people talk about sustainability, we are talking about saving the planet, climate change, but there's a lot more to it. I wanted to learn what that was. And when opportunities came my way, I didn't say no to them. I just took it up. I was in university. I wasn't any smarter. I thought, hey, a good opportunity came up. It's very much aligned to what I'm interested in. Let's just try this out and see where it goes. If it's not for me, it's not for me. So I've left some of these. That's why I'm only left with ShareRite and EcoCupid. I've left others. I've learned what I could from those experiences, picked up those lessons, moved on. So now I'm at that stage where I know exactly what I want to focus on. And that logic of, hey, you shouldn't be doing so many things. You don't know what you're doing. It's absolutely right. I didn't know what I was doing.
But playing devil's advocate, right? At 25, when someone tells me I know exactly what I want to do, I think it's a whole lot of crap.
Sure.
At 25, it's too soon. I'm playing devil's advocate.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
How would you respond to that criticism?
That might apply to people, most people. And I'm not saying that that's not true for most people.
But it doesn't apply to you.
But I feel like I know what I want to do.
So what is it you know what you want to do?
I actually answered this question when I was on live TV. I was pitching ShareRite on a TV show in Vasandam a few years ago. And the MC asked me, oh, you found your purpose in life? And I said, yeah, I think I found my purpose in life. My purpose in life is to marry my interest in sustainability with the businesses that I run. I'm a strong believer that if you really want to change the world, businesses are one of those parties that hold a significant amount of power and influence that can change a lot of different things.
Give me an example.
Well, you use an iPhone, you use Facebook. How much of what you're doing today is influenced by those two companies, right? But versus non-profit, that is, you'd definitely be involved in some as well. How much of your life is influenced by those, right? How much of your life is influenced by the political parties that you support and the people around you? The companies ultimately shape where a lot of money is going, and that ultimately shapes and runs the world. And in that sense, if you are able to manage and run a very influential company, in a certain sense, you get to influence a lot of how this world works as well. See, if
what you've just done is you've given something in a conceptual tone. But in real terms, give me an example of something that can happen and you're going to make that happen.
So I love the example of Airbnb.
Okay.
And part of what ShareRite does is inspired from Airbnb as well. Now, when Airbnb came in, it completely changed the way people started booking hotels and people started booking vacations. Same thing goes for Uber. It entirely revolutionized the taxi industry. That's pretty much what I'm planning to do with ShareRite as well for businesses. We created a marketplace that helps with the underutilization of spaces. And we feel that by scaling that up globally, we're going to solve a very big pain point that's going to change the way businesses use spaces, especially post-COVID. Because once COVID hit, people started realizing, I don't have to go to work anymore in order to do the work. So that's really going to be a fundamental shift.
You're talking about a game changer.
That's right.
Fine. It's still not clear enough for me.
Okay.
What do you mean? What do you mean by underutilized resources, spaces? What do you mean? I mean, that today you have shared services.
Yes.
And so on. You have people who are leasing out space for office and for other kinds of purposes. So where exactly is your differentiator going to be?
Take this podcast room, for example.
Yeah.
Do you know how much of the 24 hours that this is functional, is it actually empty? I can assure you at least 30% of the time.
The downtime.
It's empty. That 30%, if it was leased out, you could be making a lot more money. And currently, whatever leasing options that are out there, if you look at B2B, if you wanted a B2B service at this point, if you go online and search, you'd find about the top 5 options. You'd click on their website. Usually it's on a quotational basis. That's how B2B works.
Yeah.
That's just how the market itself works. And if you want to change that, that's not possible. But if I come in and say, you have some spare capacity, and I don't want to change your core business, but I actually want to help you make more money, that's something that people are more interested in doing. And Asians especially. We say that there's more money to be made anywhere, usually hands-on, right? So that's what I'm trying to do. That's the change.
So how is this venture going to be helping in the sustainability clause?
So think about it this way. If you're not just entirely responsible for the space that you use, the carbon emissions that comes out of this space as well is not just borne by you. It's shared by a few people. So your scope 1, your scope 2 emissions start to be shared across different parties. So in that sense, if you're looking at carbon accounting, it helps. We still have a lot to do in terms of carbon accounting, a lot of progress to be made, but it's a step in that right direction. And it's not just for spaces. We also share equipment, transportation, different types of commercial assets. So when you start looking at it that way, across the lifetime of your commercial asset, you're actually sharing it with multiple stakeholders. And those stakeholders, instead of buying new ones, instead of using more resources to create more cars, more equipment, you're actually sharing what's already existing. Now, the idea of sharing is not new. It's been out there. What I'm doing is bringing it to the mass market. Currently, it's just being done by a small handful group of big companies, some even SMEs. But I'm trying to bring this to the mass market, make it accessible for everyone.
So conventional wisdom would say, well, if it's such a brilliant idea, why didn't someone else
Why
think
hasn't
about
someone done it before? Well, it's a fair point. There's a lot of, I guess there's 2 things at play here. Time is a critical factor. Until COVID hit, it wasn't a pain point. People had spaces and they weren't using it, but it didn't hurt them because they were making more than enough money to pay for those extra spaces. Once COVID hit, they realized how much that extra space and that extra money could help them and their business, especially SMEs. When I started ShareRight, it really was because I was seeing social enterprises on the ground that I was following and supporting. They were dying off because their overheads were too high. And well, the government can only do that much to help them give grants and subsidies. But ultimately, we needed something that could help these companies. And I saw on the other side, big companies with all these spaces as well. And I thought, why not you share these spaces with these guys?
Well, it sounds pretty decent an idea. There's obviously going to be quite a bit of upside in the region. There's a lot happening in the region, and there's a lot of space in the region.
That's right.
Here's my question. You talked earlier about sharing. This concept of sharing seems to be quite alien to several entities, commercial entities, even in Singapore. I remember many years ago, during the .com era, I was in Silicon Valley.
And I was just born.
Yeah, you were just born. And at that time, there was so much of buzz. But what I observed is, in the coffee houses, coffee shops, and so on, or cafes, you will have people with their laptops selling the idea to the VC.
Yep.
Right? And then the guy next to him is another guy selling his idea to another VC. And then I actually saw this. They came together and they started negotiating a deal. They had no qualms. They had obviously met for the first time.
Right.
They had no qualms in sharing the knowledge and the ideas they have. And it struck me, that's the X factor. You don't hoard information. We have in Asia, in Singapore, there's a lot of, I'm going to keep it secret. Because I want me to benefit. But if you want to go into the sustainability space and really do wonders there, there has to be an attitudinal shift.
Yep. Definitely.
You need to be able to get people to think we, as Prime Minister Lawrence Wong talked about recently, we, not I. But that's easier said than done. It's an attitudinal shift. Do you know, I'll tell you something else. Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm quite familiar because some of my clients were from there. In Las Vegas, you know how much of collaboration and cooperation happens behind the scenes?
Yep. Between all the different.
But they are fiercely competitive
Yep.
in the front.
Mm-hmm.
But behind, they share services.
That's true.
I've run out of a particular ingredient,
Yes.
go and get it from the other kitchen.
Yep.
But that's a well-kept secret.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean? But it's again attitude. So why is it that we don't have this attitude? As a young person, I'm asking you.
It comes down to something that, and I learned this quite recently as well. I was in Australia for my exchange, and I was taking a mod called Sustainable Development. Really changed my perspective because it taught me that different worldviews, different lenses that different people wear, causes them to have a rather narrow vision on things. And when it comes to sustainability, I'll give you an example. As a scientist, I could throw all the numbers because that's what I'm good at. That's my work. That's my expertise. But if I don't make those numbers understandable to a layman, they're never going to appreciate it. And then you go one step deeper. Even when it comes down to the layman, there's multiple social groups. And if you don't understand the challenges and the stories behind each group, the pain points that they're facing, then how are you ever going to be able to speak the language that is going to actually get them to listen? Jane Goodall,
who passed away yesterday.
God bless her soul. So I was actually I had the chance of meeting her just last year, and she was saying a hungry person is never going to listen to a solution that just starves them even further.
Yeah.
Right? So you can't expect them to be thinking about sustainability and all this stuff. You have to understand their pain point and come from their perspective. So bring that back to what your question was. The reason why we don't share, and by we, I guess the Asian mentality has that a bit more in common. We don't understand what the other person is going through in most cases.
We don't trust.
We don't trust, but we don't even listen.
Yeah.
It comes down to listening.
But why? Is it a cultural thing?
You can put it down to, I guess, what we had learned down from, passed down from our previous generations, that mistrust maybe in the past.
But that's where it's befuddling.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at history, Asian civilizations had tremendous amount of cooperation, collaboration, of trust. We have always had this.
Do you think colonialism had something to do with it?
No, I suspect it was colonialism.
Yep.
And because of the way the indigenous people were treated, and then there were people who betrayed their trust.
Yes.
Amongst them. So that whole 200 years of colonization has made us more inward looking in Asia. And now we need to start opening up. We need to start the process of building trust. And that's why I'm asking you this question, because the key lies in your hands, the young people's hands, because you are tech savvy. You use social media. It transcends boundaries.
Social media is a tricky thing.
Yeah, it's double-edged.
It's in my opinion, it is doing quite a bit of harm as well as good.
Of course.
Because social media, like you said, yes, I could learn more perspectives. I could learn more about the other side. But the algorithm, what it tends to do is to kind of reaffirm what you already believe in.
Yeah.
That doesn't help.
I know. But people have acknowledged it and say, let's work around it. But what's important is you see an aggregation of ideas.
That's true.
You see a marketplace of ideas and ideals coming together, and like never before in history. The world is shrinking in that sense.
Definitely.
So there's so much of this happening. I'm enticed by what you shared earlier, and the fact that you're here sharing it openly and not keeping it as a secret. You are hoping that there will be collaborators, potential
Definitely.
collaborators will say, I like this guy's idea. Let's see if we can work together.
Like you said, the example of Las Vegas, I think having competitors is a good thing, right?
But,
you should.
but it's a good thing. But why is it that it's not practiced in politics?
Well, that becomes a geopolitical issue, right?
No. Let's start with domestic, right?
Within Singapore.
People are asking this simple question, right? Why can't there be a lot more leeway given to the opposition parties or the alternative parties in Singapore? Why can't we? Why can't we coexist? The PAP, the ruling party, and the Workers' Party, and all the other parties. Why can't we coexist? And if you can't change the signals that are coming from the top.
Yep.
On the top is binary, is zero sum. And then we're talking about we and collaboration. It's quite confusing.
It contradicts each other.
If not confounding, right? So how would you, a young person who wants to collaborate, who wants to introduce the attitude of collaboration, how would you respond to this, the signals?
Well, on a political level, there's, as someone who's just 25 years old, and I don't get too much into politics because, well, that's a whole other ballgame altogether. But what I can do is, sure, there might only be one ruling party in Singapore. That doesn't stop me from exploring other countries and seeing how other countries are being ruled, and take their cultures, their mindsets into my perspective, and have a library of lenses for myself, right? And then share that library of lens through podcasts like yours to more people, right? So it's, instead of looking at, the limitations that we have as a country, and once again, we are pretty small, right? If you want to go down to the nitty-gritty, there's so many issues and so many restrictions that we have.
No, you see, small country. I've been hearing that from all quarters, small country. It sounds to me more like an excuse.
Okay.
Right? Because actually, when you think about it, countries like Sweden, they've produced some world-class things.
Definitely.
Right? Including ABBA. And you talk about Denmark, you talk about Finland, closer to home, Korea.
Yeah.
These are all not very much larger than Singapore. So we can't keep using that. And I can't think of any other government in the world that gives out money to enterprises.
The Singapore government does that.
And the kind of support, not just grants, but schemes, programs, training, marketing. I mean, I really think sometimes is excessive, because it takes away the hunger from people if you overfeed them, but that's for a different conversation. So we are doing so much. The government is doing so much, more than many other countries, yet we don't seem to be producing the kind of iconic companies. I mean, you can't put Singapore Airlines and DBS in that category because they were incorporated, so to speak, right? They are Temasek sort of not owned, but Temasek managed and controlled, right? So what is the reason why we don't seem to be producing unicorns, for example, which are billion-dollar companies like China and India?
This was the exact same question that I was asking a few friends of mine in the entrepreneurship space, few colleagues as well. Some of them pointed it down to the numbers, the volume. Yeah. But like you said, that doesn't really hold true. We have close to 7 million people now?
Well, it might go up to 9.
Yeah. So that said, I don't really think numbers is the issue. It's more of the fact that we are comfortable. And innovation never comes from a place where comfort lies. You have to step out of your comfort zone. Humankind has never invented something when we are comfortable. We've only created something when, something has hurt us.
Necessity
Hits, and that's when we get creative. That's when innovation comes out. We don't get pushed to step out of that comfort zone. Everything within, from the education system that we lie itself, yes, it's taxing, but there is always an answer to everything. There is an answer key that you follow, you get good marks, right? You go to work, you do your duties, you get a good pay, okay, everything is settled. So what is the need for innovation at this point, right? The rest of the world is innovating and we are using their innovation. So what are we struggling, right? Is it the bad weather? That's probably one of the few things Singaporeans complain about, and maybe the MRT breaking down once in a while. But other than that, we don't actually have that many pain points for us to, spark innovation in our country. So we start taking ideas from other people and then start innovating upon. I've seen so many within the startup ecosystem, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but they are, instead of coming up with new novel ideas, they're coming up with new marketing agencies and consultancy agencies. There's plenty of those already. Sure, you might be doing something different, but it's not novel, right? It's not a bad thing, but it's really not what's going to put us on the global map.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So on that sense, I don't have a definite answer as to why we are not on the global map and why we are not innovating, but it definitely has to do with the fact that we are too comfortable. And if you really want Singaporeans to start innovating, you have to step out of Singapore.
I see where you're going with this, and there's quite a bit of truth in what you're saying, but I don't think it necessarily has to be the only way. It makes sense when you say that necessity forces us, poverty forces you to desperately come out of that, right? At least for the sake of your children, your progeny, and so on. But I don't think it is across the board. There have been various instances where, people were well off and they created something else. I give you an example, right? Ho Kwon Peng, right? His family started. They were already wealthy, right? But he could have gone and continued the business, which was very comfortable. He knew the business, but instead he said, "No, I want to do something different." And Banyan Tree came about, and Banyan Tree is very successful. The same thing with Anthony, who started Grab. Right? You're aware that he comes from one of the wealthiest families in Malaysia and Singapore, in the region, right? But he said, "No, I don't want to. It's a car distributorship, Nissan, right? Tan Chong Motors." And he said, "No." So he went, and then Grab came about. I mean, they still have a way to go in terms of profitability, but in terms of, market visibility and mind share, they are strong. But you must respect these individuals.
Definitely.
They were not in poverty, but there was something inside them. There's something inside them. So that's my question to you. You strike me as having that unique gift, that ability, that verve to go out there and do something different, to take a path not taken. Maybe there's a masochist residing in you. I don't know. You love pain, perhaps. But whatever it is, this is not just nature. I think it's nurture too. Would you agree?
That's definitely true.
You want to talk about that?
Well, if you're going down into what drives me and why I am where I am today, and it's not that far. I still have a long way to go. But a lot of it has to do with the values that were instilled in me since I was young. For example, I was told that, look, we are migrants, immigrants, by the way. From India. I was born in India. We came over. The whole family came over.
How old were you when you came to Singapore?
Practically after I was born. My dad had a job here, so we came over. So I've been growing up here all my life, but every time elections come around, or we get some kind of voucher, some kind of disbursements from the government. My parents always tell me, look, see, society has been treating us well, right? It's a good society that we live in. And when you grow up, you should always look to do something for the society as well, right? You are not here just by chance. Your growth is not just because of us as your parents. It's also because of all the people around you, right? So give back to the society when you can. We always go to temples. We do donations, right? We go to the old folks' home. We care for them. Gone to the orphanages as well. So my parents have brought me up in a way that they introduced me to different perspectives. They opened up the world for me as much as they could within Singapore itself, so that I understood that, hey, I'm not just middle-class kid, right? But there are all these other groups around me as well. They are part of society. They are part of the reason why, we're all thriving as well. And when I grow up, I should do something to contribute back to this, right? Sustainability was a huge part of it. All my startups revolve around sustainability because we practice recycling at home, right? My mom tries to do gardening. I say try because in multi-level flat, it's a bit hard. Yes. But we do all of that. And I asked my mom, why do you struggle to do all of this, right? We don't have to do this. But gardening is nice. We give back. We have plants. We are self-sustaining. So that small concepts have been planted in me as I grew up. And I guess that's the reason why once I've come to a certain point and I'm asking myself, what do I want to do with my life? All these different things form my worldview, and they influence the way that I'm thinking, okay, maybe I should do something that has to do with giving back to the society, helping the planet in some way, whatever way that I can do. But also, well, I have to feed a family, so I need to make money. So you put all these three together, and then whatever that comes out of it, so it's not something that is controlled, right? It's just all these different factors coming into place, and you're saying, I should do a startup. I should do something of my own where I can create an impact that no one else is creating as of now to help a society or part of a society that no one is helping as of now. How can I do it? Now, I haven't found the answer to it. My startups are a means to an end, right? So perhaps they would be successful. Hopefully they will be successful. And I get to help the people I want to. But I guess that's the motivation that lies behind it. How my parents brought me up. That plays a huge role.
Gratitude. You've often spoken about gratitude. Why is that so important, and who introduced that concept to you? There are two things that you often talk about, gratitude and humility.
Yep.
Why are these so important for you, and how was it introduced to you?
Well, when I grew up, so I have to give a bit of context to this so that you understand.
Sure.
I used to be cocky.
You used to be?
Might still be. But I used to be a lot more cocky in that sense. Because I grew up, I was a single kid, the only kid. Now I do have a younger brother. So the world kind of revolved around me. I was good at a lot of things that I was doing. So I was getting awards, prizes. And I thought, yeah, you know what? I'm good, right? I can do all of these things, right? When you win a lot of competitions and you slowly have that sense that you run the world.
Yeah, you're God's gift.
Yeah, so that was a terrible viewpoint to have. And then I entered Army, and I realized, and across my education as well, I ended up meeting a lot of people who were better than me. And my dad would often tell me, be humble, right? Every time I succeed in something, I go home and I tell them I'm a very proud state. I'm telling my parents, yeah, I achieved all this. My dad would say, good, great job, be humble. Pray to God, be humble.
What does humble mean? What did he mean by humble?
I asked myself that very question because when you are cocky and someone tells you to be humble, it's not exactly like 0 to 1, like, oh, I know how to get there. Yeah. And I used to ask myself, oh, what do you mean by being humble? And I guess what it means is, in a sense, being grounded, understanding that, yes, you're good, right? You're good at what you do. There's no harm in accepting that. But there's always other people who are also good. There's a lot more people that you have not met. There's a lot more things you have not seen in life. And just be confident in what you are, but accept the fact that there's a lot more that for you. There's a lot more for you to learn, right? I guess it's the sense that you always have to keep yourself open to learning. You shouldn't pretend that you know everything. You shouldn't pretend that you've hit the peak, because there is no peak to hit. Like yourself, you've much more experience than me. I presume you know what I mean by the fact that every time you hit a certain stage, there's always a lot more to hit, right? And when you hit it, then you realize, back then I used to think I was everything, but So understanding that concept at my age and knowing that, look, there's a lot more that I could do. There's a lot more that I can learn from the people around me, no matter who they are, right? It doesn't have to be someone who's better than me, right, in a particular thing. Even peers who are not performing as well, what can I learn from them? There's this saying, I'm not too sure who said it. You don't always learn something from everyone, but there is something that everyone teaches you. Not everyone can learn it, right? You have to be open to it. So it really depends on how open you are, how humble you, how grounded you are to be saying, you know what? No matter what you say, you could be saying things that I don't agree with today, but it is the mindset of saying, maybe you have something, right? And maybe I should go back, try to unpack it and see if it makes sense.
And thank you for sharing what you just did. And I must say that from my experience, there's something worse than being cocky.
Mm-hmm.
You know what that is for me, from my experience? False humility. That really grates. It's schooled humility. They teach you to manifest humility. But actually, there's a deep-seated sense of arrogance in that false humility. I'd rather you be who you are instead of pretending to be someone who you're not. And you have no intentions of being good. You know what I'm saying?
True.
It's like someone who is evil
They pretend
projecting
to be
goodness. And we can see that that person is not real, not being authentic.
Sure.
And then, of course, there's this issue of gratitude, right? Which are gratitude and humility, flip sides of the same coin, right? So when you have all of these things, what do you step back? I mean, when you step back and you have all these ideas, you have the entrepreneurial idea, you have the wherewithal to do it, the confidence to do it, and then you have the vision. You have all of those things lined up pretty well, I can see, right?
Thank you.
Where does attitude come in?
I would say that would be the foundation behind everything. Now, there's plenty of world leaders out there and CEOs, top CEOs of top companies who have terrible attitudes, right? We don't have to name them. But, and they're still successful. So attitude is definitely not something that's going to filter out success. But I feel like if you want to be remembered, the great leaders, if I ask you today, Nelson Mandela, or different, our own president, S.R. Nathan. These are names when you speak, the first thing that you remember, besides the person, is the deeds, the good stuff that they did, the way they treated people, right? What they stood for. They've definitely done a lot more than that, but these are what stands out. Because it's not about how much money you make, how much success you bring. It's those little things that people remember you for, right? So I guess that's where attitude becomes a more foundational thing, at least for me. Like you said, false humility. There's a fine line.
But it is a line.
It is a line.
Yeah.
So you genuinely need to believe in the need for having gratitude, in the need for being humble. If you don't, that's where false humility comes in. Right, you're half here and half there. That's terrible. So I guess you have to thread that line very carefully.
And I put it to you that if you have all of the other factors that are measurable actually lined up, but your attitude sucks. Attitude is not just about your attitude towards, it's not just about values.
Yep.
It's beyond values. It's about resilience.
Mm-hmm.
It's about character. You know, for me, one of the most dangerous prospects is where you have someone with great intelligence, but bad character. I can right now think of people who are causing disasters in the world, who are brilliant, but zero in character. So I think that is so important. I want to see that a lot more in our young people.
So
because there's so much of drive in excelling in measurable ways.
Yes.
But the real value is in what you can't measure. The real value, that what keeps life sustained is air. And how do you quantify air? Until you lose it.
You remind me of the exact words that you used, remind me of a speech that was circulating online by Simon Sinek. He was talking about how Navy SEALs operate. You watch that clip. It's a very famous clip. But yeah, it brings me back to that Navy SEALs would trust someone who is maybe not that capable, in the middle, but has solid character.
Yeah.
That's who they would trust.
And what the Marines believe in, you don't leave anyone behind.
Yep.
These are simple, right? So simple. Not highfalutin language, simple language, but we can all relate to it. But how many of us actually
follow it,
do it, and do it in a consistent manner, right? And this is where you've admitted this now. I think, and I saw it in your eyes as you were talking about your parents. I could see the gratitude that you had because you were reflecting.
Yeah.
Because without guru or your parents, Mata, Pita, Guru, and Devam. Devam is God. This is a Sanskrit saying. Right? Mother, father, Guru, your teacher. Right? And then comes God. And it is so humbling. That thing is so humbling. And actually it's very, very empowering when you toast to your parents.
I think one thing that goes rather unappreciated, and I too just came across this revelation in a sense, as I grew older, was the fact that we don't appreciate our parents enough.
Yeah.
And you watch a few short films about this and it doesn't really hit you as much. But when you really sit down and reflect about it, about everything that your parents have done, and rather on a fundamental level, who your parents are are humans. They were pretty much in my position 30, 40 years before. They were also a kid who trying to figure out life, got married, and then had a child. Do they know what they're doing? No. So
and there were no books at that time.
no ChatGPT to tell you how to raise a child. They were figuring it out as they went. And I think we don't give enough credit for the fact that, look, they winged it and they did this much. Good job. Right? And I appreciate everything that they've done.
Yeah.
And most people, I know a lot of people my age, they love their parents. But I also know an equal amount of people who don't. Right? For whatever reasons it is. And I feel like maybe we should start appreciating them a little bit more for every little thing that they've done, right? Waking up early in the morning to make breakfast for us, or, just paying the bills and having a shelter, right? A house. We take it for granted because we're in Singapore. But how many outside of Singapore can say the same, right? So it's those little things that I think once you start appreciating the little things, the bigger things will start falling into place, right?
And I also believe, that the people who have really made a difference in our lives are people who we may have cursed and really got angry with,
Yeah.
like teachers, right?
Yeah.
Some of the teachers that we remember were the teachers we hated in school
Yeah.
because they had a job to do. And they took the job damn seriously, and I've had teachers tell me, why do you even bother to sit for the exam? You're an embarrassment. And then you get an A.
Yeah.
And then they say, I've lost respect for exams. But you see, at the end of the day, the similarity between parents and the guru, the teacher, is they have your interest at heart.
Definitely.
And they are not here to soften the edges, and like your parents, my parents, my father in particular, came from the school of hard knocks. He came to Singapore hiding in a ship. He couldn't read a map, so he had no idea where Singapore was.
Right.
Can you imagine? He has no idea where Singapore was, but everybody was going to this place called Singapore. Later it was Dubai, And so he just hopped on this vessel. He didn't have a ticket. It was a stowaway. The courage. The courage to go, to travel, sail 8 days in choppy seas and finally land somewhere and then raise 6 children with $250 a month. Not borrowing a penny.
You wouldn't be able to empathize with it because there's no way you'd ever live that.
Yeah.
But just try to put yourself in that shoes and you really start to feel it. You get goosebumps.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Who is that?
Oh, hi.
Who are they?
My parents.
Your parents. Please.
I see.
Sindhu over there. Prasad. Hi. Please come and join us. Hi. Nice to meet you.
So that was what these additional chairs were for.
Yes. So.
I didn't see his expression properly. It's very blunt.
No, he's hiding his shock. But it's a pleasant surprise. Yes?
It is.
Did you hear what he was saying about you all?
No.
Why don't you say what you just said earlier in front of your parents?
So I was saying that I appreciate both of you, right? The amount of work that you guys have put in. The fact that as parents, you guys are also individuals who didn't really know what you were doing. Right? You were in my position 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
And there was no chat GPT.
Yeah, there was no chat GPT to teach you how to raise me.
Absolutely.
No clue.
So on that sense, I think you guys have done a wonderful job.
You were going to say a terrible job.
I wanted to, my vocabulary fails me, as it does when I'm with my parents.
Don't apologize. You're emotional.
Yeah.
You're emotional. And it's perfectly all right to be emotional because you have achieved a lot in life.
Thank you.
And the fact that you acknowledge that it's not all you're doing, right? He's also shared your advice to him about being humble, about remaining humble, and we talked a lot about what being humble means. We talked about false humility. There are people who are not humble but pretend to be humble. That's worse than being humble, than being arrogant.
Very true.
Yeah. So what are your emotions at this point in time? Your thoughts about what Pranav has achieved?
Actually, it's a long way to go. He always tells me that.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I feel proud and you have achieved this much, he says, this is nothing. I have a long way to go. So, but as a parent, I feel very happy for whatever he's achieved as of now. Then, what to say? We just shared our basic values to him.
Mm-hmm.
It was up to him to take it up. It was his own choice to take it up and implement in his life. So for that, we are very, very happy.
Yeah, because there are many parents who introduce those values, spend a lot of time going, worship, prayers, all the good things, but sometimes it doesn't rub off.
Yes.
In this case, obviously it has rubbed off. What about you, Prasad?
Exactly, we believe, what you just mentioned, and we try our level best as a parents. As parents, I mean, that's the best we can do, right, for our children.
Yeah. But what do you think now on reflection? What do you think was the single most important thing that you did right?
Something which you mentioned that I always say is that wherever you are, whatever you are doing, remain humble and simple.
Why is that so important?
Because I have seen how important it is, my life. It's not through any readings or whatsoever.
Could you share with us what you mean by how important it was?
I mean, the way you have come through in life, whether it is like, you are financially okay or not okay, family wise okay, relations wise, and the comfort you get from your parents, from your friend circle, from the school, whatsoever. Sometimes, it just take a minute for you to forget all those.
Yes.
From where you are coming, what your parents are telling you, advising you, so on and so forth.
And also, if I may just add, is the whole point of listening.
Yeah, it's listening.
And I mean, my advice, if I'm in a position to, is as we gain knowledge, as we achieve success, so-called success, we tend to listen less. We tend to be great admirers of our own voice. That is one of the biggest things you need to resist, because you will also have a fan club. You'll have a whole lot of people sucking up to you. You have a whole lot of people who are constantly telling you how good you are. And the people who are critical of you would be scared to tell you because you're powerful. That is the time when you have to really take counsel. That is if you ask me, that's the most dangerous time.
Yes.
Where you can make the biggest mistakes. Because you have a whole lot of people who don't particularly care for you, who will come and give you advice and who hang out with you. And then you just go down the slippery slope. And for me, that's so important. And it applies in life, not just your work. And in fact, I would say that once you reach a certain level of success, you need to enmesh the two, the work you do and the person that you are. We talked about that just now, right?
Yeah.
Who are the people that you remember as great entrepreneurs or great leaders? Not the people who made a lot of money. Yeah, you sometimes are a bit envious of these people who make so much of money. But the people who really grab your attention.
Sir, Ratan Tata.
Yeah, like him, Ratan Tata is a classic example, right? He remained humble right to the end. And even in Singapore, there are people who have achieved so much. And how do you put a price to that? For example, this Goh Seng Chun, who started Dignity Kitchen,
Yeah.
right?
Very nice.
Look at him. Simple man. Simple man. But I would put him on par with the Prime Minister of Singapore. No, honestly, because, it's not just academic excellence. It's not just status and standing. It's how many lives you have touched.
Yep.
And a young person like you with great success and the gift that you have, you need to lead the march to change attitude. I feel that in Singapore, we need to change the attitude of putting tremendous value on things that are material. and not giving enough credit to things that are not measurable.
That's true.
We
You know.
enforce this at home. I always say this
Good.
at home.
Yeah, we do that.
But why is that important for you?
That is most important, because materialistic thing, it can come and go, but this remains. This is a character. So we should hold the character.
Absolutely.
So my husband also always tells, don't change your character, because we meet so many people and we get influenced by that people. But he says, don't leave your character. Your character is the identity.
Absolutely.
So you should. So that's what he preaches everyone. So we just follow him.
Yeah. So to wrap the discussion, to wrap up, I'd like to hear from both of you as parents. What's your wish for him for the remaining years of his life?
I always tell him, I want you to be happy and healthy.
In that order?
Yeah.
Happy first and then healthy.
Healthy. And if you're happy, you'll be healthy.
That's true. That's true.
So I never say you have to buy a big bungalow car. No materialistic. I want you to be happy and healthy. You should prioritize your health first, because he never sleeps. I'm not complaining as a mother.
I was wondering when you're going to be the mother.
That's the mother.
That's the mother. You couldn't resist it, right?
Yeah. I thought I came here. I thought I should not complain.
This
about
podcast will extend another 30 minutes if you let that.
But it is important. Sleep is important.
Yeah.
As a mother, I feel he won't take his food at a proper time. He never sleeps at proper time. So that's
It's
the
all
only
coming
thing I
out.
worry. So otherwise, he's very good. He's good in all the stuff. Only I complain about only this. This is the only complaint I have. But
It's
I want
coming from a place of love.
yes,
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
happy and healthy.
What
That's
about
all.
you?
I just wish him, like all the very best and remain to be like how he wants his life to be, but with in the right way,
Mhm.
follow the right path. People should have a smile when they hear your name.
That's so powerful.
Mm.
That's so powerful. People say that again.
They should have a smile on their face when they hear your name. Otherwise, we can keep our face. Oh, this guy, my God.
Actually, that's such a powerful thought, because if you can actually make other people happy, the kind of happiness that you get in return
Mm.
is multifold.
So there is a saying there, excuse me, like when you die, your family members, your close people, they will shed tears. But that's not enough.
Yeah.
Someone who have no clue about you will drop their tears.
And that's because of the impact that you've had. in their life.
Yes.
So I'm going to give you the last word.
Okay.
What is your goal in life?
Mm.
You are at a beautiful age, 25. We all wish we could go back to being
Yeah.
25. No, you are. And before you know it, you'll be 40.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, really. But 25 is such a beautiful age because you have achieved a certain level of knowledge and experience. Yet you have that energy,
Mhm.
to go conquer the world. So what is that goal? Goal, not objective. What's that goal in your life?
I'll say, firstly, you're very kind for inflating the different things that I've done as well so far. I really believe I have a long way to go. Right, what I've done so far, and when you invited me for this podcast as well, I was thinking, Mr. Viswa does this with like really high caliber people. Why is he inviting me? So that was my thought. But thanks once again for having me here. And in terms of what my goal is, I want to go back to that fundamental of I want to help people. I want to help the planet, and I want to do it by making communal good through the businesses that I have. So that is ultimately, if I can, like what my dad said, right? I don't have to wait till I die, but if I can make someone else smile and they don't even know my name, They don't need to know who I am, but just through the work that I've done, through ShareRight, through EcoCupid, they don't need to know that I'm the one who helped them. They don't need to know that even ShareRight was the reason why they are, benefiting from it, but just improving someone's life, right? That would be nice. I think that would be a good step for how I want to lead the rest of my life as well.
Now, here's the deal. If you actually achieve that,
Mm-hmm.
I'll do my best to ensure you have a place in heaven.
Thank you. Thank you.
Pranav, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for inviting me over as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Pleasure.
Pleasure,
Pleasure.
actually.